I never believed in those movie moments, where something small changes everything. But that night in the old Paramount Theatre, sitting next to Miles in the flickering darkness, his hand finding mine during a jump scare, and just staying there, warm and solid and real, even after the scary part ended. That's when I knew everything I'd been trying to ignore for the past 3 months was absolutely terrifyingly true. I was falling for my best friend, and there was no going back. It started the way these things always do, I guess. Completely ordinary. Miles moved into the apartment across the hall in late August, and I helped him carry boxes up 4 flights of stairs because the elevator was broken, as usual. He had this laugh that filled the entire stairwell, bright and unguarded. And when he smiled at me over a box of books, saying, "Thanks, man, I owe you a beer," something in my chest did this weird flip that I immediately dismissed. I'd just finished a 12-hour shift at the hospital. I was tired. That's all it was. Except it kept happening. These little moments that I couldn't quite explain away. Like how I started timing my morning coffee runs to match his schedule, just so we'd bump into each other in the hallway. How I'd find myself listening for his door, the sound of his keys, his footsteps. How when he texted me random thoughts at 2 a.m, I'd be smiling at my phone like an idiot, and my roommate Tyler would look at me like I'd lost my mind. Tyler actually called me out on it first. We were having breakfast on a Sunday, and I was telling him about how Miles and I had stayed up until 4 watching old sci-fi movies, and Tyler just put down his fork and said, "Dude, you know you're into him, right?" Just like that. Casual, like he was commenting on the weather. I almost choked on my coffee. "I'm not," I said, but my voice came out wrong, defensive and too loud. Tyler just raised his eyebrows and went back to his eggs, and I sat there feeling like the floor had dropped out from under me. Because once he said it, I couldn't unsee it, couldn't unfeel it. Every time Miles texted, my heart would speed up. When he'd lean close to show me something on his phone, I'd catch his scent, something clean and cedar-like, and my thoughts would scatter. I started noticing everything about him. The way he'd run his hand through his dark hair when he was thinking. How his eyes crinkled when he really laughed. The small scar on his chin that he got falling off a bike when he was 10. The way he'd touch my arm when he was making a point. Casual and easy, like it meant nothing, when it was starting to mean everything to me. I tried to get some distance, told myself I was being ridiculous. Miles was straight. Probably. And even if he wasn't, he'd never shown any sign of seeing me as anything other than his friend from across the hall. The guy he watched movies with. The guy he called when he needed help assembling IKEA furniture or wanted company for a late-night food run. I was going to ruin a perfectly good friendship by catching feelings. And I needed to get over it. But then October came, and Miles mentioned this horror movie marathon at the Paramount. This beautiful old theatre downtown that showed classic films. He said it so casually, scrolling through his phone on my couch. "Hey, Reed, you want to go to this with me?" And I should have said no. Should have made up an excuse. Instead, I heard myself saying, "Yeah, sounds great." And his face lit up with this genuine excitement that made my stomach flip all over again. The week leading up to it was torture. I kept trying to frame it in my head as just two friends going to see movies. That's all it was. Except I couldn't stop thinking about sitting next to him in the dark, couldn't stop wondering if our shoulders would touch, if our hands might brush reaching for the same armrest. I was turning into someone I didn't recognize, anxious and hopeful and terrified all at once. Tyler noticed, of course. The night before the movie marathon, he found me standing in front of my closet like it was some kind of impossible puzzle. "It's just a movie," he said from my doorway. But he was smiling. That knowing smile that made me want to throw something at him. It's not a date. I know it's not a date, I snapped, grabbing a random shirt. But I changed 3 more times before I finally left the apartment the next evening, and Tyler's laughter followed me out the door. Miles was waiting outside the theatre, and my first thought was that he looked incredible. He was wearing this dark green jacket I'd never seen before, and his hair was slightly messy from the wind. And when he saw me, his whole face brightened. "There you are," he said. And something about the way he said it, warm and relieved, like he'd been worried I might not show, made my heart hammer against my ribs. The Paramount was gorgeous inside, all vintage red velvet and ornate gold trim. The kind of place that felt like stepping into another era. We got our tickets and headed to the concession stand, and Miles insisted on buying a large popcorn to share. Our hands kept bumping in the bag during the previews, and each time it happened I felt this electric awareness shoot through me. I tried to focus on the screen, on anything else, but I was so conscious of him next to me. The warmth of his body, the sound of his breathing, the way he'd lean over to whisper comments about the trailers, his breath warm against my ear. The first movie was a classic slasher film, and Miles had mentioned he wasn't great with scary movies, but loved them anyway. I watched him more than the screen during the tense scenes, the way he'd tense up, lean forward, his jaw tight. There was something endearing about it, how invested he got. At one point, he grabbed my forearm during a particularly intense scene, his fingers digging in, and I froze, barely breathing, until the tension broke and he let go with an embarrassed laugh. "Sorry," he whispered. I get jumpy. The second movie was where everything changed. It was one of those psychological horror films, all creeping dread and atmospheric tension. The theatre was packed, the air thick with anticipation. Miles had finished the popcorn and put the empty bag on the floor, and we were both settled into our seats, the armrest between us suddenly feeling like this enormous barrier, and also the only thing keeping me sane. The movie built slowly, this mounting sense of wrongness, and I could feel Miles getting more tense beside me. Then came the jump scare, sudden and vicious, and the entire theatre screamed, including Miles. His hand shot out and grabbed mine, his fingers lacing through mine, gripping tight. My whole body went rigid with shock. His hand was warm and slightly rough, his grip almost desperate, and every nerve ending I had was suddenly focused on that point of contact. The scary moment passed. The movie continued. The theatre settled back into tense silence. But Miles didn't let go. His hand stayed in mine, and after a moment his grip shifted, relaxed, became something gentler, more deliberate. I couldn't breathe properly. Couldn't think. My thumb was pressed against his, and I could feel his pulse, quick and strong. Or maybe that was my pulse. I couldn't tell anymore. I didn't move. Didn't dare look at him. Just kept my eyes on the screen, not processing a single thing that was happening in the movie. All I could think about was his hand in mine. The way his thumb had started moving. Just slightly. This tiny back and forth motion against the side of my hand, it felt intentional. It felt like a question. My heart was pounding so hard I was sure he could feel it. I couldn't tell if this meant what I desperately hoped it meant, or if I was reading everything wrong. Maybe he was just scared. Maybe he'd realize any second and pull away. Maybe this was still just friendship. Some boundary I didn't understand. But then he shifted in his seat, moved slightly closer, and his shoulder pressed against mine, solid and warm. And he still didn't let go. The movie ended eventually, though I couldn't have told you how. The credits rolled and the lights came up slowly, and we sat there, still holding hands, as people started gathering their things and filing out around us. Finally, I made myself look at him. He was already looking at me, and the expression on his face made my breath catch. Nervous and hopeful and scared, all at once. His eyes searching mine. "We should probably," I started. But my voice came out rough and I had to clear my throat. "We should probably head out." He nodded but didn't move, didn't let go of my hand. "Reed," he said quietly, and my name in his voice did something to me. "Can we talk? Outside?" We made our way out of the theatre, still holding hands, and I was hyper-aware of everything. The weight of his hand in mine. The people who might be looking. The way my entire world had narrowed down to this connection between us. We ended up on the sidewalk outside, the city lights bright around us. The cool October air sharp and clean. He finally let go of my hand and I immediately missed the contact. Felt the loss of it like something physical. He shoved his hands in his pockets and looked at me, and I could see him trying to find words. "I should just say it," he finally said. "I've been trying to figure out how to say it for weeks. I like you, Reed. Like, really like you. More than friends like you. And I grabbed your hand in there because I was scared, yeah, but I didn't let go because I didn't want to go. Because I've wanted to hold your hand for months, and I finally had an excuse, and I couldn't make myself let go." I stood there staring at him, my mind completely blank. He kept talking, the words tumbling out now. "I know this might be weird. I know we're friends and neighbors, and maybe I'm ruining everything by saying this, but I can't keep pretending I don't feel this way. Every time I see you, I want to be around you. Every time you smile at me, I feel it everywhere. When you texted me at midnight last week about that documentary you were watching, I was smiling so hard my face hurt. And I needed you to know." "Miles," I said, and his name came out soft, almost reverent. "I've been losing my mind for 3 months. I thought I was going crazy. I thought it was just me." He blinked at me, hope dawning across his face. "Really? Really?" I confirmed, and I couldn't help smiling even though I felt like I might cry. "I rearranged my entire morning just to run into you. I listened for your door. Tyler's been making fun of me for weeks because apparently I'm obvious as hell." He laughed, this bright, relieved sound, and suddenly he was closer. "So we're both idiots," he said. Apparently, I agreed. We stood there grinning at each other like fools. And then his expression shifted, became more serious. "Can I kiss you?" he asked, his voice quiet. And I nodded, not trusting my voice. He stepped closer and cupped my face with both hands, his palms warm against my skin, and kissed me. Soft at first, tentative, like he was afraid I might disappear. I kissed him back, my hands finding his waist, pulling him closer, and he made this small sound that I felt in my bones. The kiss deepened, and everything else fell away. The street, the people passing by, the anxiety I'd been carrying for months. There was just Miles, kissing me like I was precious, like he'd been wanting this as long as I had. When we finally pulled apart, we were both breathing hard. His forehead rested against mine and his hands were still on my face, his thumbs stroking my cheekbones. "That was," he started, then just laughed. "Yeah," I agreed. We stood there for a moment, just breathing together, and I felt something settle in my chest. Something right and true and terrifying in the best way. We walked back to our building hand in hand, talking about everything. How we'd both been trying to hide it. When we'd each realized. All the little moments that had meant something. He told me about how he'd almost said something a dozen times. how he'd been working up the courage, how seeing me tonight, he'd decided he couldn't keep quiet anymore. I told him about Tyler calling me out, about standing in front of my closet like an idiot trying to pick the right shirt. He laughed and squeezed my hand and said, "I'm glad you wore that one." At our floor, we stood between our two doors, neither of us wanting the night to end. "Come in," I asked, and he nodded immediately. We ended up on my couch, sitting close, his head on my shoulder, my arm around him. Tyler was staying at his girlfriend's place, so we had the apartment to ourselves. We put on a movie neither of us watched, too busy talking, kissing, learning the feel of each other. He told me he'd known he was bi since high school, but hadn't dated much. Too focused on school, on his career. But something about me had gotten past all his defenses. I told him I'd been out since college, but hadn't been in a serious relationship in years. Hadn't wanted to be. Until him. Until these feelings had crept up on me and rearranged everything I thought I knew about what I wanted. At some point we ended up lying down, tangled together, his fingers tracing patterns on my arm while I played with his hair. "This is real, right?" he asked quietly. "This is happening?" "It's real," I promised. "It's happening." He smiled against my shoulder. "Good," he said, "because I don't think I could go back to pretending now." "Me neither," I agreed. He stayed over that night, and we fell asleep wrapped around each other. And when I woke up the next morning with him still there, his face peaceful in the early light, I felt this overwhelming sense of rightness, like all the pieces had finally clicked into place. He stirred and opened his eyes and smiled at me, this sleepy, genuine smile, and said, "Morning." "Morning," I replied, and kissed him because I could. Because he was mine now, and I was his, and it was real. Tyler came home that afternoon and found us making breakfast together, moving around each other with an ease that felt natural. Miles stealing kisses while I tried to flip pancakes. Tyler took one look at us and said finally, "Thank God. I was about to lock you two in a closet." We laughed and Miles blushed, and I felt happy in a way I hadn't known I could feel. That was 6 months ago. We've been together ever since. We haven't moved in together yet. Still keep our separate apartments across the hall, but we're together almost every night. His place or mine. It doesn't matter. What matters is falling asleep next to him and waking up to his smile. What matters is the way he still reaches for my hand during scary movies, and how I always take it, lacing our fingers together. What matters is that I found something I didn't know I was looking for, and it turned out to be everything. Sometimes I think about that night, how close I came to not going, to making an excuse, to running from my feelings. How different everything would be if Miles hadn't been brave enough to hold my hand, to keep holding it, to tell me how he felt. I think about all the tiny moments that led us there, all the small choices that added up to something huge. And I'm grateful for every single one. Because the truth is, love isn't always dramatic. Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it's your best friend grabbing your hand during the scary part and not letting go when it's over. Sometimes it's that simple, and that complicated, and that absolutely perfect. And I wouldn't change a single thing. Total char count, 16,847.